Why inflation feels worse than before. Inflation isn't new. Prices have always gone up over time. That's just how economies work. But lately, something feels different. Even when inflation numbers start going down, people still feel like everything is getting more expensive. Groceries feel expensive, rent feels expensive, eating out feels expensive. Even basic things feel harder to afford. So the big question is simple. Why does inflation feel worse than before? The first reason is something called cumulative inflation. When prices rise, they rarely go back down. They just stop rising as fast. So even if inflation drops from 9% to 3%, prices don't reset. They stay high. That means everything you buy today is still more expensive than it was a few years ago. And your brain compares current prices to what you remember. You remember when groceries were cheaper. You remember when rent was lower. You remember when gas didn't feel painful. So even when inflation slows down, the damage has already been done, and that makes inflation feel permanent. The second reason is wages didn't keep up. Yes, wages have increased in many industries, but for a lot of people, they didn't rise fast enough. If your salary increased 5%, but your expenses increased 15%, you didn't gain anything. You actually lost purchasing power. That's the real issue. Inflation isn't just about prices rising, it's about your money buying less. And when that happens across multiple categories at once, it hits harder. Groceries went up, rent went up, insurance went up, utilities went up, everything increased at the same time. That creates pressure from every direction. In the past, inflation was often concentrated. Maybe gas went up, but food stayed stable, or rent increased, but everything else stayed manageable. Now everything is moving together, and that makes it feel overwhelming. The third reason is everyday essentials got hit the hardest. People notice inflation most when it affects things they buy frequently. You don't buy a TV every week, you don't buy a couch every month, but you do buy food, you pay rent, you pay for transportation. When those prices rise, you feel it constantly. That creates a psychological effect. If your grocery bill increases every week, it feels like inflation is always happening. Even if other prices are stable, the frequent purchases dominate your perception. So inflation feels worse, even if the data says otherwise. The fourth reason is lifestyle compression. Many people built their lifestyles around lower prices. When inflation hits, they don't immediately change their habits. They try to maintain the same lifestyle. But now it costs more. That means less money left over. Savings shrink, investments shrink, financial breathing room disappears. So even if you can still afford everything, you feel tighter. That's the key difference. Inflation doesn't always make you unable to buy things. It makes you uncomfortable buying them. And that psychological shift matters. The fifth reason is shrinkflation. This is when products stay the same price but get smaller. A bag of chips has less inside. A cereal box is lighter. A product quietly changes size. You don't always notice immediately, but over time, you realize you're getting less for the same money. And that makes inflation feel sneaky. It feels like prices are rising, even when they technically aren't. Because in reality, they are. You're paying the same for less. Another reason inflation feels worse today is visibility. We see prices constantly. Apps, online shopping, food delivery, subscription services, everything shows prices up front. You're reminded daily how much things cost. Years ago, price changes were less visible. Now every increase is obvious, and that constant exposure makes inflation feel more intense. There's also something called anchor pricing. Your brain remembers past prices as a reference point. You compare today's prices to what you think things should cost. If you remember paying $5 for something and now it's 10, it feels wrong. Even if your income increased, the comparison remains. and that makes inflation feel unfair. Another factor is fixed costs rising. Housing, insurance, healthcare, these are not optional. You can't easily reduce them. So when these costs rise, you can't adjust much. You're stuck paying more. That removes flexibility. And when flexibility disappears, financial stress increases. In the past, people could cut back on optional spending. Today, more of your budget goes to fixed expenses. So inflation hits harder. There's also the role of expectations. For decades, inflation was relatively low and stable. People got used to small price increases. So when inflation suddenly spikes, it feels shocking. It's not just the level of inflation, it's the change. Rapid changes feel worse than slow ones. Even if the final prices are similar, the speed matters. And recent inflation moved fast. Prices jumped in a short period. That made it feel dramatic. Another reason inflation feels worse is uncertainty. When prices rise unpredictably, people feel less secure. You don't know what things will cost next month. You don't know if your expenses will keep rising. That uncertainty creates anxiety. Even if you can afford things today, you worry about tomorrow. And that emotional factor makes inflation feel heavier. There's also the impact of interest rates. To fight inflation, central banks raise rates. That makes borrowing more expensive, mortgages cost more, car loans cost more, credit cards cost more. So even if prices stabilize, financing becomes harder, and that adds another layer of pressure. Now, inflation isn't just about prices, it's about debt becoming more expensive too. So people feel squeezed from both sides. Higher prices and higher borrowing costs. That combination makes inflation feel worse than before. Another important factor is inequality. Inflation doesn't affect everyone the same way. Higher income households may absorb price increases more easily, but lower and middle income households feel them immediately because a larger portion of their income goes to essentials. So inflation hits harder where budgets are tight. That widens the perception gap. Some people feel fine, others feel overwhelmed. And when more people feel overwhelmed, inflation feels worse overall. There's also something subtle happening: quality of life inflation. Even when prices stay similar, expectations rise. You want faster service, better products, more convenience, but those upgrades cost money. So maintaining the same lifestyle costs more, and that contributes to the feeling of inflation. Finally, there's the memory effect. People remember price increases longer than price stability. Your brain holds on to that used to be cheaper. So inflation leaves a lasting impression. Even after prices stabilize, the feeling remains. So why does inflation feel worse than before? Because it hit essentials, because it happened quickly, because wages didn't keep up, because fixed costs rose, because everything increased at once, and because psychologically, we feel it every day. Inflation isn't just an economic statistic, it's a lived experience. And right now, that experience feels heavier than before. Even if inflation slows down, the feeling doesn't disappear because prices rarely go back. And once your baseline changes, your perception changes with it. That's why inflation feels worse today, not just because prices went up, but because everything around your financial life tightened at the same time. If you found this video interesting, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.